Great morning. Great morning. Great morning, you guys. Come on in. Come on in. Hey, everybody. Testing. All right. All right. Come on in. Come on in. Good morning, Stacy. How are you, beautiful? You guys be sure to share the broadcast. Hey, Jackie. Good to see you. I love it. I love it. I love it. Make sure you share the broadcast. I'm getting ready to share it. Hey, Carolyn. I love it. Hey, beautiful. Praying for your continued speedy recovery, beautiful. All right. All right. So, you guys, listen. Let me tell y'all something. God is not playing. Y'all see, I got my little camouflage on. You can't hardly see it because what? Oh, I don't have no light on. That's what's going on. I don't have no light on. Jesus, hold on. Let me turn a light on, honey. Let me get the light turned on. What is going on, honey? What is going on? Okay, okay. All right, y'all. Hey, everybody. So let me tell y'all, this is not a soft word. If you're looking for a soft word, this is not a soft word. What does that mean, Dr. V? This ain't for the faint at heart. This ain't for the soft people. This ain't for the folks that want to be patted today. That's not what this word is for. If you're looking for that kind of word, then what I would suggest is that you hop on off this live, go on about your day, go on another live, do something else, because that is not the word that is coming. You know, I am continually amazed by God, and I don't know why I'm amazed, because he continually does this kind of stuff. But this morning, he gave me an assignment that I had to do. And I had to handle some really tough stuff, face some really tough stuff, right? And I had to go by the water. Well, y'all listen, y'all may not know this about me. I like looking at water. I don't like necessarily, I don't have to be by it, but I like looking at it, but I don't have to be by it. And it was cool, right? So cold air blowing off the water. I had to sit on the little concrete thing that was cold. Like none of that was really vibing well with me, right? But God gave me an assignment. And it's so interesting to me because I said, well, God, I don't know what I'm preaching. He said, I'll tell you, like he always does. He said, go to Ezekiel. And I was like, oh, Lord, Ezekiel. Because, Ezekiel was a hard prophet. Ezekiel was hard. Ezekiel had to do some hard stuff, had to go through some hard stuff. God gave him some difficult assignments, all of that. But yeah, I had to go to Ezekiel. And so that's where we're going to be today in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get started because it's time for us to step into the watchman role. It is time for the watchman to arise. It is time for that. So let's go to Ezekiel 3, and we are reading from the New Living Translation, Ezekiel 3. And the word of God reads, the voice said to me, Son of man, eat what I am giving you. Eat this scroll. Then go and give its message to the people of Israel. So I opened my mouth and he fed me the scroll. Fill your stomach with this, he said. And when I ate it, it tasted as sweet as honey in my mouth. Then he said, Son of man, go to the people of Israel and give them my messages. I am not sending you to a foreign people whose language you cannot understand. No, I'm sending you to people with strange and difficult speech. I'm not sending you to people with strange and difficult speech. If I did, they would listen. Y'all, hold on. Listen to that now. He said, if I sent you to a foreign people whose language you couldn't understand and who had a strange, difficult speech, they would listen. But the people of Israel won't listen to you any more than they listen to me. For the whole lot of them are hard-hearted and stubborn. But look, I have made you as obstinate and hard-hearted as they are. I have made your forehead as hard as the hardest rock. So don't be afraid of them or fear their angry looks, even though they are rebels. Then he added, Son of man, let all my words sink deep into your heart first. Listen to them carefully for yourself. Then go to your people in exile and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Do this whether they listen to you or not. Y'all heard that? Do this whether they listen to you or not. Then the Spirit lifted me up, and I heard a loud rumbling sound behind me. May the glory of the Lord be praised in his place. It was the sound of the wings of the living beings as they brushed against each other and the rumbling of their wheels underneath. Hold on. Okay. The Spirit lifted me up and took me away. I went in bitterness and turmoil, but the Lord's hold on me was strong. Then I came to the colony of Judean exiles in Tel Aviv, beside the Kabar River. I was overwhelmed and sat among them for 7 days. After 7 days, the Lord gave me a message. He said, Son of man, I have appointed you as a watchman for Israel. Whenever you receive a message from me, warn people immediately. If I warn the wicked saying you are under the penalty of death, but you fail to deliver the warning, they will die in their sins, and I will hold you responsible for their deaths. If you warn them and they refuse to repent and keep on sinning, then they will die in their sins, but you will have saved yourself because you obeyed me. If righteous people turn away from their righteous behavior and ignore the obstacles I put in their way, they will die. And if you do not warn them, they will die in their sins. None of their righteous acts will be remembered, and I will hold you responsible for their deaths. But if you warn righteous people not to sin, and they listen to you and do not sin, they will live, and you will have saved yourself too. Then the Lord took hold of me and said, Get up and go out into the valley, and I will speak to you there. What? So I got up and went. And there I saw the glory of the Lord, just as I had seen in my first vision by the Kabar River. And I fell face down on the ground. Then the Spirit came into me and set me on my feet. He spoke to me and said, Go to your house and shut yourself in. There, son of man, you will be tied with ropes so you cannot go out among the people. And I will make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth so that you will be speechless and unable to rebuke them, for they are rebels. But when I give you a message, I will loosen your tongue and let you speak. Then you will say to them, This is what the sovereign Lord says. Those who choose to listen will listen, but those who refuse will refuse, for they are rebels. Y'all may be wondering why I paused in the places that I paused. Because God thinks he's funny. God thinks he's funny. Okay. So I told y'all that God gave me some instructions. So I had to follow the instructions. I had to go by the water. Had to go by the water. And he began to speak to me about some things, right? And he gave me some things to do. Like from here. No. Is it on? Turn it back on. Okay. Turn that. One of them is the electric over there, so leave that on. Yeah, thank you, babe. Okay. You know where my creamer and coffee is?
When you asked me for it yesterday, I didn't find it down there.
Okay. Thank you, baby. I love you. I'm sorry, y'all. Listen. So as I'm reading the text, maybe I was the only one who was hearing the parallels between what Ezekiel was doing and what God told me to do. Maybe it was just me, but I saw the parallels. And so I was like, what? By the river? Because it hit me. Oh, he told me to go by the water. And he began to talk to me about the water. And he began to show me some things and tell me some things. And then gave me some additional instructions to follow. And then told me I was preaching Ezekiel 3. Okay. I was talking to my sister this morning. And she told me, she said, you say stuff that other people won't say. And she was like, thank you for just doing what God says. Ezekiel had an extremely difficult job because he had to deal with the stubborn, hard-headed people. And God had already told them they are not going to listen to you. He didn't say they might not listen to you. He said they're not going to listen to you because they don't listen to me. Well, go anyway. Tell them anyway. Do what I said anyway. It is a challenging thing when you have to go tell a people something when you know that they're probably not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen, right? So when he tells them, first of all, he says, Son of man, eat what I am giving you. Eat this scroll. Now, this particular scroll that he ate, when he ate it, it tasted as sweet as honey in his mouth, right? And then God goes on to say, Son of man, go to the people of Israel and give them my messages. Now, I'm not sending you to foreigners, people that don't speak the same language. No, I'm sending you to your people. Okay? I'm sending you to your people. Now, the other people, if I sent you to them, they would listen. But these people are not going to listen because they're hard-hearted and stubborn. But guess what? I've made you as obstinate and hard-hearted as they are. I made your forehead as hard as the hardest rock. So don't fear them or their angry looks, even though they're rebels. Listen, let me tell y'all something. One of the things that God has been real big with me on is not being afraid of people's faces. Not being afraid of people not understanding what he has for me to do. Listen, everybody don't have the same assignment. Everybody's not called to the same people. Look at Peter and Paul. Peter and Paul were both called by God to go to people, right? But their messages and who they were sent to was different. So you cannot allow people and their faces to stop you from doing what God has called you to do, because there's a reason he chose you for the assignment. There's a reason he chose you. There's a reason that you were called, the reason that you were chosen, a reason that he gave you the assignment that he gave you. It's your assignment. You can be looking at it like, oh, well, somebody else can do it. He didn't tell somebody else to do it. He told you to do it. Oh, well, I'm going to let somebody else go to them. No, he said, you go. He said, I'm giving you these messages. Eat them. Now, they taste good now, but I want you to take them to a people who's not going to listen, who's going to reject you and what you say. But as stubborn as they are, I've made you more stubborn. So when people talk about the fact that I am hard-headed, that I'm stubborn, that I'm rebellious. Let me tell you what God told me. He said, I've given you those characteristics. They put negative labels on them, but I've given it to you for a reason, because I'm calling you to people who are like that, and you won't back down from them. They won't make you cower. They won't make you quit. So listen to this. This is what you got to understand. If God has called you to a people that are hard-hearted and stubborn, you got to be more hard-hearted and stubborn than they are. You got to stand on what God said harder than they stand on what they're saying. You got to do what God says no matter what. You got to tell them what God says say. I remember having to tell someone that if they did not stop particular sin, they would die. And I meant physically die. And I remember somebody said, oh, God would never say that. Yes, God would. To save your life. Oh, yeah, he'll tell you, if you don't stop this, you're going to die. If you go down this road, death awaits you. If you keep doing this, you will go to prison. I remember having to tell one of my cousins that, and I didn't even know what he was doing. I had no idea what he was doing, but I know God told me, tell him if he doesn't stop what he's doing, he's going to jail. So I told him what God said. He probably thought somebody told me what was going on, what he was doing. No, I didn't know what he was doing. But sure enough, he did not stop. He went to jail and then prison. But his blood was not on my hands because I told him. I told him what God told me to tell him. And see, this is the problem. Y'all, let me tell y'all, this is the problem. See, you want to please and pacify people, and you don't want anybody to come against you, and you don't want anybody to say anything negative to you or about you. Listen, this is why I've had to go through all of the stuff that I've gone through so that I can do what God said. And if people get mad, if people say, oh, that ain't God, oh, she ain't doing what God said, oh, she in the flesh, oh, she this, oh, she that, hey, it is what it is. But I have to do what God says do. I have to say what God says say. Even when it's a hard word, even when it's something that I don't want to say to someone I don't want to even say it to, I've got to be obedient. Because my failure to be obedient is not only going to cost them, it's going to cost me. Did you read what he said? He said, listen. He said, don't be afraid of them or fear their angry looks, even though they are rebels. He goes on, he says, son of man, let all my words sink deep into your heart first. Listen to them carefully for yourself. Then go to your people in exile and say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Do this whether they listen to you or not. Literally, today was about God taking me through that process. He was talking to me about some things. He said, you're going to have to say some stuff. I'm like, why I got to say it? Can't nobody else say it? You got to say it. But I had to hear it first. So he began to be very clear with me about some things, right? He began to explain some things to me, to cause some things to make sense. And then he said, okay, now I want you to go and tell the people this. Go and share this with the people. The word goes on and says, then the Spirit of the Lord lifted me up and I heard a loud rumbling sound behind me. May the glory of the Lord be praised in his place. It was the sound of the wings of the living beings as they brushed against each other and the rumbling of their wheels beneath them. The Spirit lifted me up and took me away. I was in bitterness and turmoil, but the Lord's hold on me was strong. I was bitter. I was angry that I had to say this to them, that I had to go do this. I was in turmoil because it was a whole clash between my will and God's way. But his hold on me was strong. So I got there, I went, I did it, I went to where he said, but then I just had to sit with him for 7 days because I couldn't even begin to say what he told me to say. I just had to sit with him. I just had to be there. Because am I going to say this? I don't know yet. Am I going to do this? I don't know yet. Let me just sit here for a minute. I done came, God. I made it. Okay? Let me just sit here for a minute. Let me get my bearing. Let me get myself together. After 7 days, he gave me a message. He said, Son of man, I have appointed you as a watchman for Israel. Whenever you receive a message from me, warn people immediately. If I warn the wicked, saying you are under the penalty of death, but you fail to deliver the warning, they will die in their sins, and I will hold you responsible for their deaths. If you warn them and they refuse to repent and keep on sinning, they will die in their sins, but you will have saved yourself because you obeyed me. You did what I told you to do. If righteous people turn away from their righteous behavior and ignore the obstacles I put in their way, they will die. And if you do not warn them, they will die with their sin, in their sins. None of their righteous acts will be remembered. It will be almost like it was in vain, and I will hold you responsible for their deaths. But if you warn righteous people not to sin, and they listen to you and do not sin, they will live, and you will have saved yourself. Then the Lord took hold of me and said, get up and go out into the valley, and I will speak to you there. So I got up and went, and there I saw the glory of the Lord, just as I had seen in my first vision by the Kabar River. And I fell face down on the ground. Why did he fall face down? Because it connected for him. It connected for him. He saw God's glory like he did when he went and sat by the Kabar River, being obedient to the Spirit of God. And God's glory showed up. And then he went to where God told him to go again. And he saw the glory again, and it overwhelmed him. So he fell face down on the ground. And then the Spirit of the Lord came into me. Not just came to me, but came into him and set him on his feet, made him stand up. And he spoke to me and he said, wow. Go to your house and shut yourself in. There, Son of Man, you will be tied with ropes so you cannot go out among the people. And I will make your tongue stick to the roof of your mouth so that you will be speechless and unable to rebuke them, for they are rebels. But when I give you a message, I will loosen your tongue and let you speak. Then you will say to them, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Those who choose to listen will listen, but those who refuse will refuse, for they are rebels. When you do what God has told you to do, you are not responsible for how people respond to it. You're not responsible for what they do with it. You're not responsible to make them do anything. You're responsible for telling them what God said to tell them. When you do that, when you do what God has told you, when you say what God has told you to say, then you have done your part. And anything someone else does with that, that is on them. So God is real clear. When you tell them what you're supposed to tell them, you save yourself, even if they don't listen. If they listen, you've saved them and you've saved yourself. It's not your job to force them or make them do anything. It's simply your job to give the message. I've had to give a lot of hard messages. I've had to give messages that resulted in relationships ending. I've had to give messages that had people mad at me. I had to give messages where pastors would act like they didn't know what I was talking about and like something was wrong with me when I know I clearly heard from God. And later some stuff would come out that confirmed what God told me to say. But if I had allowed any of those things to stop me from saying what God said say, then people's blood would be on my hands. You have to do what God said do. You have to. It's your responsibility. It is your obligation. And chances are you'll have to do it with people that don't listen to you. They don't want to hear what you have to say. They're stubborn, hard-hearted, and rebellious. But it ain't personal. It's not about you. Because they're not listening to God either. It doesn't stop you from having to do it. When I look at the prophet Ezekiel, I'm reminded of how God uses me. Doesn't always look like people think it should look. I don't always show up the way people think I should show up. But I do my best to do what God says the majority of the time. I'll never say that I always get it right because I don't. There's some things I don't want to do. I don't want to do that. I don't want to say that. I'm good, God. But because I'm a woman after God's own heart, He knows what my heart is, and my heart is to please Him. My heart is to obey Him. So He knows even if I fuss, even if I argue with Him, because I argue with God, even if I fight with Him, because I have fought with God, I was bitter and in turmoil. God, why you always got to have me do this stuff? Why can't somebody else do it? Why do I always have to be the one to have to do this? Why do I always have to be the one to be the example? Why do I always have to be the one to be the bigger person? Why do I always have to be the one to go back? Why do I always have to do that? Why is it always me, God? Why? Why you always got to do that to me? Why you can't do that to somebody else? He said, because I know you'll do it, even if you don't want to. I know you'll call them, even if you don't want to. I know that you'll say what I tell you to say, even if you don't want to, because you have a heart after mine. So it really doesn't matter what people do to you or have done to you. If I tell you to go to those people and tell them something, if I tell you to go to those people and do something for them, if I tell you to go and you're going to do it. Whether you do it right then or whether you do it later, you're going to do it. The fact that God has that kind of confidence in me amazes me because I don't always have that kind of confidence in myself. But I know I've been called to be a watchman. I've been called to say some things, to address some areas that people don't want to address, that they don't want to talk about, but they're key to our freedom, to our breakthrough, to our liberty, to our ability to fulfill our destiny. So I often find myself being the example, being the one that God puts out front for people to see what happens when you do, as well as what happens when you don't. The impact of various things on our lives, why we need to address it, why we need to go back and deal with it, why we've got to face it, why we need to heal. It's not an accident that God is talking about healing like He is. It's not. He's very intentional and He is very deliberate. So everything that He has been having me say about healing is absolutely crucial to your harvest and to your destiny. So you can choose not to heal. You can choose not to forgive. You can choose not to face. You can choose not to address. You can choose all of that. It's your choice. But what you will not be able to say is Dr. V didn't tell me that my healing was attached to my harvest. My harvest was attached to my healing. Because healing is hard work. It requires exposure. It requires vulnerability. It requires you to be vulnerable in ways that is often uncomfortable. But it's necessary because that's where change occurs. So many of us have these secrets, things that we've held on to, and we wonder why. we don't feel good enough because you got some stuff that you're holding on to in shame. And God is trying to release the shame, but he can't because you won't face it. You won't look at it. You won't deal with it. You've blocked it off. When I think about different periods of my life, I have some periods of my life where there are things I literally don't remember. Like I don't remember. And people will be saying, remember when such and such happened? No, I don't remember because I blocked a lot of that season of my life out of my mind. I suppressed it because it was hard and it hurt. So I suppressed it. So God is bringing up things that have been suppressed for decades so it can be dealt with. Not just for me, for those he's trying to get to this next place. Because you can't go to this next place with that stuff. So you're going to have to make a decision. Either you're going to stay where you are with the stuff, or you're going to face the stuff and go to where he's taking you without it. Coach Eric often says, you need to leave your baggage, your suitcase at the door. Why are you taking it with you? When you cross that threshold, when that new door opens, why are you carrying that old luggage with all that old stuff in it? Because you don't want to face it. Well, no, it's time to stop that. It's time to deal with it, and it's time to move forward. It's time to forgive you. I'm reminded of the military. In the military, as a soldier, you have to follow commands. And in war, those commands will require you to do things that you wouldn't normally do as a civilian. But you have to do them. And then you have to live with them. And one of the things that often happens for veterans, and I don't care what branch of the military you're in, if you've been in battle, if you've seen battle, then there have been some things that you probably have tried to suppress. You've tried to forget them. Things that you did, things that you witnessed, you've tried to just suppress it. Just if I just suppress it, then it'll be okay. The problem is when you suppress it, it comes up in dreams, nightmares, night terrors. You feel anxiety. You become overwhelmed with anxiety because you got all this suppressed stuff and you're terrified something's going to come up. Something's going to trigger it. It's going to cause you to remember. But what if you faced it and released it? What if you faced it and accepted that it wasn't your fault? What if you faced it and forgave yourself because you had to do a hard thing in a hard time? What if you released the shame associated with whatever it is that you've kept as your secret? Today, God took me on a journey of release, right? I had to release some things. I had to release. First, I had to face. I had to deal with. Then I had to release it. And I had to release me from guilt and shame. You see, when you do what God tells you to do, there's a freedom that comes with it. It's not in vain. There's a reason that God trusts me to say the hard stuff. It's because he knows I will. But where I'm going, I'm going to have to say even harder stuff to even bigger people. And I can't afford to carry shame and guilt and fear with me. So if you want to get to the next place that God has for you, you're going to have to release your guilt, your shame, your fear. You know, that's really what produces anxiety. Guilt, shame, and fear. Get anxious because we're afraid that we're going to be exposed. We're afraid that we're going to be seen. We're afraid that they're going to know. They won't know. They're going to know. How will they know? We're afraid of it. But I came to free you today. I came to tell you that we serve a God who is awesome, who is incredible and impeccable. He has the ability to do exceedingly and abundantly above all that you could think or ask. He's called you, chosen you to serve in a role as a watchman, to watch out for the very souls of people around you, to tell them what he says to tell them, to go where he tells you to go. But first and foremost, to listen to his voice so that you can hear what it is that he has to say to you, so you can absorb it and then you can share it. So it's not an accident that he had me do what he had me do this morning, and that it was so similar to what Ezekiel had to do. Not an accident at all. Instead, it was divine. And I need you to know that this is divine, God's divine, impeccable timing, because he wants to set you free. But he also wants to save some other people, and your voice is required. There's this thing that the banks do now. And some other companies use it as well, but it's a voice activated authorization. So what they do is they have you to say something, right? And then they use your voice print to verify that it's you. Stay with me. They use your voice print to verify that it's you. Now, for many of you, you find yourself when God tells you to do something and it's something that you don't want to do, saying, first and foremost, I don't know if that was God. Well, his word is our voice print. It allows us to hear his voice, to know what his voice sounds like when he's talking to us, to know that we're not crazy. And I could have said, well, maybe that wasn't God talking to me this morning. Then I read Ezekiel 3, and that's exactly how he talked to Ezekiel. So I know it was him. Listen, God has given you everything you need to be successful, everything you need to walk out what he's promised you, everything that you need to be able to do it. He's already given it to you. And the question is, will you do what he has said? Will you do what he says? Will you go where he says go? Will you say what he says say? Will you do it? The key is obedience. Ezekiel was obedient. Ezekiel obeyed God. Will you? Will you do what it is that God said do? Will you go where it is God said to go? I just know for me that I will obey. Will you obey him?
Tell me where you want me to go. I'll go.
Let me know if you can hear the music. I want to make sure I love that God is a God of choice. He gives us freedom to choose. It's up to you whether you obey or not. It's up to you whether you heed warning or not. It's up to you whether you do what God says or not. It's your choice. I'm only responsible for telling you what God says to tell you. What you do with it is in your hands. How you use it is up to you. I can tell you what God's heart is for you. I can tell you consequences of your choice. I cannot make the decision for you. And you can't do that for anyone else. So when you tell someone what God told you to tell them, when you go and you do what God told you to do, and the people don't respond the way that you know that God desires for them to respond, you don't have to carry the burden after you've done your part. Their blood is not on your hands. But if you fail to do what God said, if you fail to say what God said say, and they die in the midst of their sin, your hands are covered in their blood. God is going to hold you accountable. So the next time that God tells you to do something, the next time that God tells you to say something, the next time that God tells you to go somewhere, and you decide in your infinite wisdom that you are not going to do it, know that should the people you were called to, should the people you were sent to, should those people that God selected you specifically to go and to say something to die in the mess of their life, He is holding you accountable. And I don't know about you, but I got enough to deal with being accountable for me. I don't have time to have the accountability for all these other people because I did not do what God said. And I'm not doing that. That's what I'm not doing. So if I look stupid, if I look foolish, if I have to put my pride on the shelf, if I have to ask forgiveness for something I did not even do, it's worth it to be in God's will. The safest place to be is in the will of God. The most dangerous place to be is outside of it. Because when you are in the will of God, there is a hedge of protection that surrounds you. It's time to heal. It's time to release guilt, shame, and fear, so we can walk out our assignments in God fully, and we can know for real, that we are enough, just like we are. Trust God and obey. There's a hymn, and it was one of my favorites. It said, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be something in Jesus than to trust and obey. I trust God enough to follow his instructions. And y'all, sometimes I don't want to. Sometimes I don't want to go where he wants me to go. I don't want to say what he wants me to say. Today, I was so tempted to just turn around and come home. Like, it was frustrating. I couldn't figure out where to park and all this stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to go home. He said, no, you're not. Turn around. If you got to drive all the way down there and turn around, you do just that. Go do that. But you're getting ready to do what I told you to do. I'm so thankful I did. And I pray this word blessed you. I pray that you got something that gives you the courage to do what it is that God has told you to do. I know for me, I'm encouraged. And there are things that have held me hostage that can no longer hold me hostage. When are you going to open the door to the cage of guilt, shame, and fear that has had you locked in? I won't even say locked in, I'm going to say closed in, because literally all you have to do is push the door open and step out. Today's your day to do just that. If you're ready to do that and you're not quite sure how to do it, make sure you reach out to me and let's talk about how you can break out of the confines that have you tied up right now. My prayer for you is this, that you would hear the voice of God with great clarity, that you would feel his love, that his angels would be encamped about you, ministering to every broken place in you, and that you would get up and do what it is he's called you to do. Because although someone else can do it, they will not do it the way you will do it. I love you guys to life. And oh, Stacy, do you want to post about the pastor's appreciation? They are doing a pastor's appreciation for me. I was shocked, y'all. I did not know. But they're doing a pastor's appreciation tomorrow at 7 p.m. on Zoom. If you want more information on how you can be a part of that pastor's appreciation, if my ministry has touched you and blessed you in any way, please make sure that you leave a comment or reach out to Stacy Gregory, and she can guide you and tell you what you need to do in order to be a part. There she is with her fine self. I'm grateful that they're choosing to honor me and appreciate me, because they didn't have to. You know, I don't take that lightly. I don't take it for granted. But know this, God is for you and not against you. And even if it seems like a difficult thing, is anything too hard for God? Mm-mm. And is anything too hard for you? Nope, because God resides in you. Love you guys to life and life more abundant. Be blessed.